But this episode, we're going to talk about our top 3 most overrated players of all time. Like I said, this is in honor of Jason's controversial, very controversial, overrated player bracket on the VIP
to
group.
say the least.
To say the least. If you're not a member of the VIP group, search 9 Plus Us VIPs on Facebook. Come check it out. We actually have what's the bracket we have going on right now? It's the best MLB logo, right?
It is. It is the best MLB logo. I think we are on match 4 of the first round.
Oh, sweet. Sounds like I got some voting to do because I think I've only done 2. So that's as of Friday night, June the 12th. So, if like I said, if you're not in the group, come join us. We have a lot of fun there, a lot of good conversation, and also special deals sometimes from the shop, and we'll get into that later. But anywho, here we go. Jason, share with me your number 3. Let's go 3, 2, 1. Okay. So your number
All right.
3 most overrated player. Who you got?
I think an easy number 3. And one of the big controversies. I'll segue before I even get into anything because that's
Okay.
what I'm going to do. One of the big controversies were in the tournaments and the discussions was some people were going strictly numbers, strictly statistics, and I get it and I agree with it. One thing that I know Brig and I have talked about in the comments on one of the posts was player attitude, their hustle, how they are in the game, are they clutch, how are they in the locker room. For me, number 3, it's an easy pick for me. It's A-Rod. He's a guy that was blessed with a ton of talent.
Yeah.
But was a bit of a prima donna. He came with a lot of mental baggage, a lot of physical baggage, as we eventually found out with the PEDs, which is going to be a recurring theme with me. And I think he took away from the Yankees sometimes in a way that was not positive for the team. Sure, they were super successful, but when you have a team with Jeter and then you got A-Rod, Jeter just kind of had that. He was held to a certain standard because he made himself that standard, and A-Rod was just.
Sorry, A-Rod was just what? Sorry, you cut out there at the very
I'm
last
sorry.
second.
A-Rod was just A-Rod. You got what you got with him, and that's all you were gonna get. You weren't gonna get more. You weren't gonna get less.
And see, like for me, A-Rod, I wouldn't call him overrated. I would call him hated for sure because of the PED thing. But I mean, he exceeded expectations. He played, and obviously he had help, but he still, when everybody was like when he came back and everybody was wanting him to fail, he outplayed those expectations. He was still out there hitting home runs when he was, quote unquote clean, because who knows at that point. But at the same time, he went out there with what was possibly a massive distraction and played well for the most part. I mean, there were a couple times he'd go out there and lay eggs, like in the postseason and stuff. But as a Mariners fan, having watched him come up, and granted I was very young, but when he came up and played his early years, I mean, that was just... And there's a reason the Rangers wanted to pay him when he left Seattle, right? Because
I definitely think there were 2 A-Rods. There was the Mariners A-Rod, and he was... I think the expectations put on him might have been a little too much to some degree, and I think that's what led to where he went.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
that Mariners A-Rod was something, and then Yankees A-Rod was a whole different creature.
He really was.
Just like there was random immaturity on a guy who had played on 3 teams, like yelling at someone on the base path to get them to miss catching the ball, and like just little things like that. I'm just like,
Yeah, I always crack up about that because it's one of those things you joke about playing pickup ball or like at practice with your buddies, but you never actually have the guts to do it in a game. And he had the guts to do it in a major league game.
Yeah.
I just crack up about that. It's so funny.
Why did you decide to do that?
that of all moments in your entire life that you make
Yes.
that stupid move in a big league game. It just now that actually cracks me up. I laugh about that. Like anytime it's brought up, I laugh so hard because it's so funny. But but no, I think you're right. There were two different A Rods. There was the Mariners A Rod, which I actually had pretty close and up close and personal experience with, and then the Rangers and Yankees A Rod was a completely different person. And as Briggs says, that he may or may not be a sociopath. I don't know. We'll see. But but and that really came out, especially with the Yankees. But anyways, all right. So for your number 3, you got A Rod. Okay. For my number 3, this is probably going to be the most controversial thing I say in my entire life. I'll be honest with you. I know there are certain people who will agree with me on this, but this is something that I've actually felt for a while. I'm going to go with Babe Ruth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Shots fired.
Yeah, that is a shot fired. And I understand that. And I'm probably going to get a lot of people coming after me on this. And that's fine. Like I said, at me. That's just fine. I'll have a conversation with you. But let me defend myself here, okay? Babe Ruth essentially ended the dead ball era, okay? Which, that's a big deal. I mean, it was that he completely changed the game of baseball, which I appreciate, right? But at the same time, I'm a basketball fan. Steph Curry changed basketball. He essentially eliminated the center, but I'm not going to ever say that he's the best player ever, even in the top 5. Okay? So Babe Ruth played in an era where the pitching may or may not have been very good. He hit 11 home runs in 1918 and led the league. He hit 29 home runs in 1919 and led the league. Granted, he went on 54, 59, 41, 46, 47, 60, 54, 50, 46, 49, 46, 41. He didn't lead the league with 41 or 34 at the end of his career, towards the end of his career. But at the same time, he did have all those, which, like I said, what was the pitching like back then? Jason, for all I know, you and I may have been able to step in the box and hit 10 home runs that season. When he was hitting 54, 59. I don't know.
I can see your argument. I can. I'm not going to be, holier than thou on this. I can see your argument. And to make another basketball reference, since you referenced basketball, you can easily see Michael Jordan in his prime, who is the equivalent to Babe Ruth of basketball, playing, being competitive, and being successful now.
Yeah.
You can't say the same thing about Babe Ruth.
Exactly right. Yeah, that there are pitchers now who, with the understanding of spin rate and the physics that go into pitching, I mean, Aroldis Chapman might just blow 3 fastballs by the Babe. I don't know. He does that to a lot of guys, but maybe he could do that 3-4 times in a row. That he won't ever catch up to that 100 and what is now 103 mile an hour fastball.
Some guys top out at that, yeah.
Yeah, that his bat may never catch up to that because he was swinging that log. You get him something that's a little more ergonomically designed, maybe an axe bat, something a little bit lighter than that log. Maybe he will catch up to it, but I don't know if he ever would. And he kind of had, as another thing people are going to kill me for, I think, he kind of had that Giancarlo Stanton swing from what I remember. Like if you watch those videos and stuff like that, it looks like he kind of has that Giancarlo Stanton swing where it's really, really fast through one zone, and those hands are really tight. You know what I'm saying? That
he's trying to.
He's trying to hit a home run every single at bat, which is fine.
Right. He had the power to do it.
Exactly.
He was built to do it.
Exactly. He's built to do it. He was kind of a portly guy. He was, let's see, it was 6'2", 215. Okay, which I'm not one to talk because, anyway, but
I'm there with you.
But no, I feel like given if he were to be taken from his era and brought into this era, so many people are like, oh, the Babe would still dominate. No, I don't think he would. And I don't feel like we should be propping up a player from 100 years ago where the game was completely different. Yes, he changed the game, but I don't think we should be propping up a player from 100 years ago and the game was completely different than what it even is now as the best player in history, because there are players now who would go back then and just crush the ball. That's what I believe.
No,
That's
I
why.
see your point.
So that's why Babe Ruth is number 3 for me.
All
All right,
right.
you ready to move on?
Sure.
Okay. All right, let's go to number 2. Who you got for number 2?
I have Ryan Braun.
Ryan Braun. That's a good one. Please tell me why.
Uh, it's just looking at his. I'm gonna do the numbers thing on this one,
Okay.
and it does tie into PEDs. You look at his numbers before he got nailed for PEDs.
Mm-hmm.
He was batting what? Let's see here, over 300, 37 homers, 118 RBIs, and that's at his peak.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, he's averaging 280, 27 homers, under 100 RBIs.
Mm-hmm.
His value on performance enhancing drugs and where he is after that, two totally different players.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy seeing guys like that because you see some guys who it's like, oh, he still would have been a great player. Like people talk about Barry Bonds. He was still a Hall of Famer before he took steroids, right? Allegedly. But Ryan Braun has been an All-Star one time since then.
Yeah.
And that makes that's evidence
He's
right
almost
there.
the epitome of the guy who needed them to succeed.
Yep. Yep. For sure. Absolutely. I totally agree with you on that. That's a perfect way to put it. He is the epitome of the guy who needed them to succeed to become an all-star. So, because since then he's been a good player, but he has not been anywhere near a great player at all.
And boy, is that an albatross of a contract for the Brewers.
Yes. So bad. So bad. And, we talked about the CBA coming up next year, and, maybe that's something that we'll see because players have called for contract voiding with positive PED tests.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep an eye on because that could have saved the Brewers big time.
Well, without a doubt.
So
Without a doubt.
So, all right, my number two. This is one where I don't think there's a whole lot of controversy, but I think I've got kind of a little bit of a different angle on it. I've got Bryce Harper at number 2. Now, before I go too much further,
I'm kind of glad you mentioned him.
Well, I'm a huge Bryce Harper fan. Like, I like watching him play the game. I like his his attitude. That he's got the long hair and he's intense. He's excited. He's excited about baseball, and that's kind of the way I approach it. It's a ton of fun. Get excited about it. But I feel like he's overrated, but not by any fault of his own. Right? Because the guy was on the cover of Sports Illustrated at 16?
16.
So right there, that bar is set so high, he's never going to be able to meet it. That he would have had to put up Barry Bonds steroid. There I go again. Barry Bonds numbers to be considered. He would have had to set the home run record. He would have had to hit 325, 330 every single year with 40 home runs to meet those expectations.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like the Nats rushed him through the system. I mean, he came up at 19. Sorry, go ahead.
So it's funny you say that because the Senators, as we mentioned earlier, that's like kind of like my home minor league team that I go see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the Nats AA affiliate. So I saw Bryce Harper as a teenager play baseball.
Nice.
And I was turned off from him fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of glad you brought him up because this is something I can talk about pretty from my personal experience as a fan.
Mm-hmm.
I saw him as a teenager refuse to sign autographs for a couple of kids.
Okay.
And that instantly turned me off on him.
Mm-hmm.
And had we been having this conversation 2 seasons ago, he would have been my number 1 pick because I saw him as a hothead.
Mm-hmm.
I saw him as cocky.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to see him play every day as a Philly. And I saw all the positives that were being talked about with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think him as a Philly in that whole mess with Gabe Kapler as the manager and McCutchen going down,
mm-hmm.
I saw him step up and become a leader, and I was thoroughly impressed with him in his first season as a Philly. And I was not really on the fence or on the ball with him signing as a Philly. I was on the fence.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thoroughly impressed with how he handled himself with maturity and grace last season.
Yeah, and that was one of the big knocks on him in with the Nationals was that he wasn't a clubhouse leader, and I think he was just miserable. I think he was miserable with the Nats. That's part of the reason he was such a hothead and why he was kind of barking at the media. And granted, he was also very young. That's one of the things with the minor league system is it gives these guys a chance to mature before they get to the big leagues. And he spent like a season and a half in the minors was all. And I feel like that was a major disservice to him as far as his development goes. That the Nats probably would have been accused of tampering with his service time if they'd kept him down any longer because obviously he was ready. But they could have just said, maturity-wise, he's not ready. He cannot handle a big league clubhouse yet, But I mean, I don't know if that's the case. But I do feel like the Nats did him a disservice of only having him in their minor league system for a year and a half.
And I agree with you. I think he was miserable as a national. He does the way he comes across as a Philly, not even talking like as a homer now, just as a baseball fan viewing a player's progress.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think in watching any of his interviews or watching him play the game as a Nat, I remember him smiling, which sounds stupid, but
yeah, no, for sure.
He's all kicks and giggles as a Phil.
Mm-hmm.
Like he loves playing in Philadelphia, and that's a crazy thing to say about any athlete.
Because most people don't. Yeah, well, and
exactly.
And one thing too is, I mean, he is a dad now. I mean, you and I both know that being a dad goes a long ways to making you mature. So I'm sure that helps too. But I think where he's playing goes a long ways. He's finally, and he was forced to step up with the Phillies, like you said last year, that he was forced to be a clubhouse leader because of injuries, and he was never really forced to do that in Washington because A, it wasn't asked of him, and B, there were veteran pitchers around him, and Steven Strasburg's been there as long as he have, or longer, or whatever. I'm not sure exactly when he was drafted, but he's had other guys around him who were the leaders. He didn't have to be. He could just go out there and play the game, and maybe he was miserable with that role. Maybe he wanted to be more of a leader, and they're just like, oh, don't worry about it, just go play the game. So I don't know, but like I said, number 2 most overrated player for me, not by any fault of his own, but because of the expectation and the mantle that was put on him as a young phenom. That's just kind of the way it worked out for him. I do hope that he has a good year this year and next year when things come back because I'm a big fan of his. So
he was on fire in spring training.
Oh, jeez. I always have a hard time with guys like that. Like, I always think back to Dustin Ackley. Dustin Ackley with the Mariners was a spring training all-star. I actually called it out one time. The Mariners posted his slash line during spring training, and I said, well, let's see what he's doing in June. And they said something back. I don't remember what it was, some snarky comment, but I was like, whatever. And then, of course, in June, he was like batting $150. So
I was so excited for this season watching the spring training games because the Phils actually looked like a well-rounded team, and I think a lot of that has to do with having an experienced manager and not a statistical guru.
Yeah. Guys get handcuffed by those stats, by like the analytics and stuff, and that makes me absolutely insane. Speaking of this season, like being excited about this season, so Baseball Reference, one of my favorite sites because I'm a stat nerd, they're doing a simulated season. Since there's obviously no games, it's something for them to do. I was looking at this yesterday, and of course, in a pretend baseball season, the Mariners are on top of the AL West by a half a game over the Oakland A's at 44-27. Wouldn't you know it? Let's see where the Phils are. The Phils are 32-36, 7.5 back of the Braves.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
but if you want to see how your team is doing in pretend world, go check out it's baseball-reference.com. They have like I said, that simulated league. It's a bunch of fun. I think the Mariners are going to win the Pretend World Series. We'll see how it goes. Pretty excited about it. But
just an awesome site to go back and look at and compare players.
It is, and one of the things I love doing is going back and looking at games that I went to, because I have a really hard time following games that I'm at if I'm not doing a book, and I don't like to do that at the stadium. I just like to enjoy it.
You like to get lost in the game.
Yeah, exactly right. And I totally get lost in the game. So what I like to do is I like to go back and find games that I've been to and check the box score and see exactly what happened. See how the game shook out. It's a bunch of fun. They have games back as far as you can look, pretty much. They have those box scores. So that's a blast. But anyways, we're on to number 1, right? Your number 1 overrated player? All right, who's your number 1 all-time overrated player? Jason, ready, go.
So I was torn on this. Okay. Because I almost went with Jonathan Papelbon.
Okay.
Almost. And that's just more because of what he did to locker rooms.
Mm-hmm. Torn apart.
But, and it's someone we've both referenced now, I went with Barry Bonds. Simply because Bonds' trajectory pre-San Francisco was through the roof. He was going to be a Hall of Famer. He was going to be an all-time great.
Mm-hmm.
And then he started juicing. I mean, you can't be polite about it. He started juicing. Yeah. His entire physical shape changed.
I showed my wife a before and after picture a few weeks ago, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, that's steroids."
I mean, and it's something I always reference a lot, and I know you've seen me reference it on the group. Is Ken Burns baseball? I think if you're a baseball fan, if you're a casual fan, you should watch it at least once. It is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
On their 10th inning, they talk about the home run chase, and a San Francisco sports writer talks about how Barry Bonds had this amazing season in '98, and it was completely overshadowed by McGwire and Sosa.
Yeah.
And he was quoted as saying, if that's all they want, that's all they're going to get. And from '98 on, if you look, his entire, not just physical shape changed, but his entire approach to the game changed.
Uh-huh.
And he just became solely a home run hitter. He went from being this great, amazing, all-rounded baseball player to a freak of nature in his 30s.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about this for a minute. This is what's crazy to me about Barry Bonds. He won an MVP. He won 2 MVPs in Pittsburgh. 90, 92. His first year in San Francisco, he wins an MVP. And then after that, still a great player, outstanding player. And then he wins 4 in a row, 2001 to 2004. I mean, he is, like you said, Ryan Braun is the epitome of somebody who needed steroids to be great. Barry Bonds is the epitome of somebody who was great, and then steroids took him to the absolute next level. Just a freak of nature when it came to baseball, because I've heard people talk about his eye when he's up batting, that he could track the ball longer than anybody had ever seen. That's why he was such a good hitter, that he saw the ball better than anybody to begin with. I mean, 92, he led the league in walks. 94, 95, 96, 97, this guy, he's a phenomenal, freaking amazing hitter.
He was a natural baseball player.
Yes,
if there was ever a natural baseball player, he was it.
Mm-hmm.
And it just seems like insecurity or jealousy.
Yeah, I don't know.
Led to what he did, and he never needed it. Mm-hmm. That's, I think, why I think he's overrated. He never needed performance-enhancing drugs to be an amazing baseball.
And yeah, I mean, I think if he had never ever juiced, he still would have gone down possibly as a top 5 player of all time. I mean, that might just be hyperbolic and a little bit of a stretch, but I mean,
I think healthy. He was on that trajectory.
He was healthy. He played every day. I mean, in '99 he played 102 games, but other than that, man, he's got 130, 140 games every single year. So I think he definitely could have been a top 5 player of all time had he not done steroids, and now he's the asterisk, the absolute asterisk in the Hall of Fame. So
and it just frustrates, as a fan, it frustrates me because amazing player.
Absolutely, yep. 100%. Yeah, and it's one of those things where because I remember watching him when I was younger because he was one of those guys that had some of his baseball cards, so I followed him, and I do remember how good he was, and like I was young in the early '90s, mid '90s, but he was a guy I remember seeing on SportsCenter, seeing how good he was and how great of a player he was, and then seeing that as I got older, it just gets you that really nasty taste in your mouth,
Oh yeah,
it's
without a
gross,
doubt, without a
gross,
doubt. It's a
absolutely
shame
gross.
too,
It really is a
because he
shame.
should be in the hall.
Oh, for sure, yeah, he should be, and there is a real possibility he still could have broken the home run record even without steroids. I don't know
Yeah.
if he would have, but there is a real possibility. So, okay, my number one. This is gonna make a lot of people really mad. I'll be honest with you. I've I've kind of argued this a little bit with Brig. There was an episode a while ago where we kind of talked about this, but yeah, I'm gonna go with it. I'm gonna go with Derek Jeter as my number one.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
and yes, I'll give him all the intangibles because there's a reason they called him the captain. The way he conducted himself was absolutely professional every single day, on and off the ball field. Like you talk about the intangibles, locker room guy, but for me, ability wise, his intangibles by far outweighed his ability. Okay, and and mostly my argument is based just on regular season because you can't argue that Jeter's postseason were ever overrated because he was. I mean, there's Mr. November, that didn't come from nowhere, and um, that flip that everybody has seen, everybody knows, that just makes me so mad. I was just so angry in the moment that it happened because I was convinced that the A's were going to beat the Yankees and they didn't, and the Diamondbacks had to go beat them, which is cool because now I'm a kind of a D-backs fan. But anyways, no, I just don't feel like Jeter was like, if you put him up against most guys on that team ability-wise, he wouldn't stack up. That if if you had A-Rod and Jeter coming in side by side and said, A-Rod, we're going to give you a chance to win the shortstop position in New York over Derek Jeter, A-Rod would have won it, I feel like. Because he was the better fielder. And by that point, A-Rod with the steroids, he was probably more of a third baseman body, but I still think he could have beat out Jeter for shortstop defensively. Um, but I mean, I feel like I don't know, sometimes like for me, really what it comes down to is Jeter was helped with playing in New York. If he had played in Minnesota, if he'd played for the Twins, he wouldn't be the Derek Jeter that we all know and some love. Um, and like I respect him. I don't love Derek Jeter because he was a Yankee. He's a filthy Yankee. Um, if he'd played in Seattle, I don't think he would have been Derek Jeter because A-Rod wasn't necessarily A-Rod until he went to New York, right? Everybody knew who he was, obviously, because there was the discussion around the biggest contract in professional sports history or North American sports history. But I don't know. It just, for me, like, Derek Jeter just doesn't do it for me, I guess is what I'm trying to get to.
I think Jeter definitely benefited from coming up with veteran players when he came to the Yankees. I don't think there's many people who are going to out hustle Derek Jeter, though. I think his work ethic was why he became what he became.
Yes. Yeah.
And I don't think you could. So maybe with the A-Rod comparison, they're apples and oranges basically.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to Jeter, he's gonna work hard, he's gonna hustle, he's gonna do everything he can to improve.
Mm-hmm.
And A-Rod was a very gifted baseball player.
He was a natural ball player where Jeter had to work more for it. Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense to me. But I do feel like Jeter benefited a lot from being in New York. That I don't think he would have been Derek Jeter if he'd been playing even like San Diego or anything like that. That massive market, the NY on the hat, the pinstripes helped elevate his stature. I feel like, and that's just me. That's
I also, I mean, I'm not a Yankees fan, but I also think that New York market made him grow as a player and a person. I mean, he had to step up at times, and he
Mm-hmm.
other players probably wouldn't have wanted to.
Yeah, that's true. It's really easy to shrink in that environment, right? And he came up as a young kid and was able to perform. I mean, he won the Rookie of the Year. What's that? 24th in MVP his second year, which, you know, I feel like still could have been helped by the pinstripes, but that's just me. But no, I will absolutely give you that it would have been easy for him to shrink in that market. You know that there could have been a lot of Jeter, you bum, and he could be like, yeah, I am a bum. You know,
I
instead
mean,
he
and we
says,
both
no, I'm
know
not.
there are players who don't want to go there.
Mm-hmm. Well, Brig has talked before about how Sonny Gray said that he couldn't handle the market, which that's nothing against Sonny Gray. He's a great pitcher, but you know he's actually playing better now in Cincinnati, or has been.
And some guys thrive in a small market environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and so I'll give him that credit that he did rise to the occasion to play in that crazy market. And I think, and from all the stories that I've heard about him, that's pretty much what his parents groomed him for. Was they said, if you're going to play baseball, you got to be able to handle it. And so they kind of, taught him how to be professional and act professional and everything like that. But no, just for me, it's really just like, and it might just be the Yankee hater thing in me that he just doesn't do it for me. So he's number one on my list. You can send me your angry tweets and things like that. That's fine. But that's my list. I've got Babe Ruth, Bryce Harper, and Derek Jeter.
I think only one of them people would agree with you on.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's true.